by whose decease the crown of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland is solely and rightfully come to the Prince William. We, therefore, the Lords Spiritual and Temporal of this realm, and members of the House of Commons, and representatives of the realms and territories, aldermen and citizens of London and others, do now hereby, with one voice and consent of tongue and heart, publish and proclaim that the Prince William become our only lawful and rightful liege lord, by the grace of God, of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and of his other realms and territories, King, head of the Commonwealth, defender of the faiths, to whom we do acknowledge all faith and obedience with humble affection.
Good evening. Today on Royal Report Live, we bring you an exclusive account of the most poignant moment in recent British history, the morning that reshaped a nation. I'm your anchor, and this is exactly what happened when Princess Anne and Catherine, Princess of Wales, stepped into the spotlight to guide their country through profound grief. It began without warning in early July 2025. Buckingham Palace issued a brief, solemn statement. King Charles III had passed away after a courageous battle. Within moments, Operation Menai Bridge was in full effect, a meticulously rehearsed, centuries-old protocol modernized for our times. Flags across the United Kingdom were lowered to half-mast. Church bells tolled, and a hush fell over every town and hamlet from London's grand boulevards to remote village squares. Inside the palace walls, the air was heavy with personal loss. King William V, now sovereign by divine right, gathered his siblings and children in a private sitting room. He had laughter in his eyes and duty in his soul. William said, his voice breaking as he recalled his father's gentle humor and unwavering commitment. Around him, Princess Anne stood erect, her naval uniform immaculate, her presence a pillar of unspoken strength. By contrast, Catherine balanced sorrow with maternal care, kneeling beside Prince George and Princess Charlotte, explaining in soft tones that their grandfather had gone to join the ages. Moments later, the royal siblings emerged onto the palace forecourt. A crowd of thousands held flowers and candles, faces tear-streaked, yet determined. Television cameras zoomed in as Anne raised her chin. Catherine aligned her steps with hers, and together they walked forward, symbols of unity at a time when unity was in shortest supply. Their footsteps echoed on marble, a stark counterpoint to the muffled sobs behind them. This was no mere procession. It was a declaration. Anne led with the poise of a seasoned officer, every measured stride honoring tradition. Catherine followed her veil, tracing the ground, conveying a grace that belied the turmoil within. Observers noted how Catherine reached out once to steady Charlotte's trembling hand, a gesture that momentarily shifted the narrative from pageantry to pure, unguarded humanity. Back inside, William donned his military attire and prepared for his first duty as king, hosting foreign dignitaries at Westminster Abbey. Yet even as he greeted presidents and prime ministers with firm handshakes, onlookers caught fleeting glimpses of grief in his eyes. He paused mid-greeting, once bowed his head, and pressed a handkerchief to his lips. A single tear escaped, underscoring that behind every diplomatic exchange was a son mourning the man who shaped his life. Picking up where we left off on those cold marble steps, where protocol and grief intertwined, we move now to the heart of the state funeral itself. In the hours that followed, Westminster Abbey transformed from a place of worship into the epicenter of national mourning. Imagine cathedral doors swinging open to reveal rows of polished oak pews lined with solemn guests, heads of state in dark suits, ambassadors clutching programs, and members of the public watching from behind barriers, their breaths visible in the crisp morning air. Inside, the Archbishop of Canterbury awaited his cue. As the gentle tolling of the Abbey's ancient bells faded, a hush fell so complete you could hear the soft rustle of fabric. Then, in perfect unison, a choir rose voices, soaring with love divine, all loves, excelling one of the late king's favorite hymns. Their harmonies filled the vaulted ceiling, the music weaving through stone arches as if carried on a breeze. Behind them entered the chief mourner, King William, now clad in full military regalia. His shoulders squared as he approached the altar, but his jaw trembled ever so slightly. At his side marched Princess Anne and Catherine, their veils down, expressions composed yet unreadable. As they took their seats in the front row, cameras caught Catherine reaching under her seat to grasp William's hand, offering strength without words. The service began with scripture readings chosen for their themes of legacy and hope. The first passage from the book of Ecclesiastes reminded the assembly that a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. William lifted his eyes to the carved ceiling, his chest rising and falling as if counting invisible beats. When the second reading declared, "They shall run and not be weary, they shall walk and not faint," a single tear traced down Catherine's cheek before she deftly wiped it away. Moments later, the most dramatic turn unfolded, the dramatic pallbearer transfer. At precisely 10:15 a.m., a detachment of Royal Navy ratings carried the king's coffin, draped in the royal standard, into view. But instead of the usual gun carriage drawn by horses this time, the sailors marched in shoulders squared, their polished caps gleaming. It was a subtle yet powerful tribute to Charles's naval service and his lifelong support for the armed forces. As the coffin paused before the congregation, William stepped forward. For a tense beat, silence reigned. Then, in a voice both steady and raw, he spoke these words: "My father served this realm with unwavering devotion. Today we honor not only his memory, but the ideals he embodied, duty service and love." His gaze moved to Anne, who inclined her head, then to Catherine, whose lips pressed together in determination. In that moment, William reclaimed the narrative the young king was here, not just to mourn, but to lead. Following the solemn committal, the Abbey's doors opened again, and the procession reformed for the journey to Windsor. Outside, rain began to fall, gentle at first, then more insistent, washing the cobblestones and mingling with the tears of onlookers. But rather than dampen spirits, the shower felt like a benediction, a final farewell from the heavens. And so, with hearts heavy yet resolute, the royal family prepared for the next act of this historic day. Stay tuned as we follow them from Westminster to Windsor, where private grief and public ceremony converge once more. As the royal procession departed Westminster Abbey, under the steady drumbeat of the yeomen of the guard, the scene shifted from solemn sanctuary to the rain-slicked streets of London. Just moments earlier, the gentle weeping choir and Archbishop's benediction had closed the Abbey doors. Now the cobblestones glistened beneath a steady drizzle, a fitting tribute to a life measured in service and sacrifice. King William led the way, his tunic gleaming with medals earned in his father's name. At his shoulder walked Princess Anne, naval epaulets reflecting the gray sky, and Catherine, Princess of Wales, her veil drawn firmly across her face, yet revealing eyes alight with resolve. Together they formed a triad of continuity, past, present, and future. The route wound past the Palace of Westminster, where MPs paused in silent homage, then through Whitehall's columned facades and onto Horse Guards Parade. There, a moment of high drama unfolded as the carriage bearing Charles's coffin paused before the mounted guard. The trumpeters of the household cavalry sounded a sharp fanfare. The clarion call broke through the drizzle, drawing gasps from assembled crowds. In that instant, grief and grandeur collided, proof that even the oldest traditions can still surprise. Behind the main carriage, a smaller contingent followed on foot, William's siblings, including Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, their steps in perfect time. Prince George clutching his mother's hand, Princess Charlotte stoically clutching a single white rose, and young Prince Louis peering up at Catherine, his face a mix of curiosity and solemnity. Observers noted how Catherine bent forward, whispering words of comfort to Louis, an echo of the childhood stories she once shared of his grandfather's garden. As the procession reached the Mall, the wide avenue framed by the Victoria Memorial, global dignitaries stood at parade rest. Presidents and prime ministers removed their hats, heads bowed. In a rare, unscripted moment, France's president stepped forward, placing a sprig of olive on the path before the carriage, a powerful symbol of peace and the late king's diplomatic legacy. William offered a brief nod of gratitude, a silent exchange that spoke volumes about Charles's international influence. Rain-drenched onlookers pressed forward with umbrellas, raised but noise was minimal, only the distant tolling of Big Ben and the soft shuffle of naval boots. Every so often a sniffle or a stifled sob punctuated the solemn hush. Yet among the mourners, locals and tourists alike held smartphones aloft, capturing the historic moment for posterity, proof that even in mourning the monarchy adapts to the modern age. By mid-afternoon, the cortege reached Lambeth Bridge and crossed the Thames. Water lapped against the piers as the carriage rolled past waters Charles had loved often, kayaking on the royal estates. On the bridge's south end, Catherine paused. With fervent precision, she extracted a folded letter from her muff, a personal tribute she later revealed was penned by William's youngest children. She tucked it under the corner of the royal standard, before the naval guards resumed their stride, the secret gesture known only to a few. Finally, the procession arrived at Windsor Castle's outer gates. Here, crowds thickened, some clutching printed photographs of Charles in happier times. As the gates swung open, a hush fell. The castle's ancient stones seemed to absorb the collective sorrow. Inside, the royal family would reassemble for the private committal, an intimate ritual, unseen by the world, yet steeped in centuries of tradition. But before that closing chapter, there was one more public milestone, the moment when Princess Anne stepped forward to conduct a final salute, raising her ceremonial sword in a gesture learned in childhood drills, then lowering it to signal the end of the formal honors. Simultaneously, Catherine rested a gloved hand on William's arm, drawing him back from the carriage's side, an unscripted embrace that turned global headlines. Emerging through Windsor Castle's gates after that unscripted embrace, the royal family entered the secluded quadrangle where the private committal awaited. Within these ancient walls, public ceremony gave way to intimate farewells. Here, behind heavy oak doors, King William, Princess Anne, and Catherine stood shoulder to shoulder as the bearer party gently lowered the coffin into the vault below St. George's Chapel. The moment carried the hush of history itself. Candles flickered against stone walls, their flames dancing in time with muffled heartbeats. Anne, ever the stalwart officer, removed her hat and stationed herself beside the vault, straight-backed and vigilant. Catherine, her veil now drawn tight, knelt to retrieve a sprig of rosemary from her bouquet, an herb symbolizing remembrance, and placed it atop the coffin. William watched his shoulders lifting as he swallowed a catch in his throat. As the Lord Chamberlain lifted his ivory wand, the traditional emblem of office, it lay for one final moment in his palm before snapping with a sharp report. Wood fragments fell like silent testimony to the end of Charles's official duties. A single echo resonated through the chapel, and even the guards' stoic faces softened as they bowed their heads. Then came the readings, chosen by the late king himself. The archbishop intoned verses from John Donne Death, "Be not proud, though some have called thee mighty." His voice trembled on the final lines, and in that tremor lay a lifetime of affection. Catherine grasped William's hand, squeezing it until her knuckles whitened, while Anne's gaze flicked briefly to the stained glass window, where a sunbeam broke through clouds, an image of faith piercing sorrow. Next family members stepped forward. Princess Eugenie placed a crimson poppy wreath symbolizing Charles's support for veterans. Prince Andrew, with measured composure, laid down a conductor's baton in tribute to the king's beloved musical pursuits. Finally, William himself knelt, touching the coffin's polished surface, as if seeking one last connection. He closed his eyes and whispered a private farewell before straightening to face his kin. In these hushed exchanges, the royal family shed their ceremonial armor. Laughter threaded through tears as Anne recalled Charles's habit of hiding cookies in unexpected places like a mischievous schoolboy. She quipped, eliciting bittersweet smiles. Catherine shared how Charles had braided George's hair on summer mornings, a memory that drew fresh tears from everyone present. As the final note of "Abide with Me" drifted through the chapel, the choir's voices fell silent. William gave a subtle nod to the guards. In perfect formation, they stepped back, revealing the empty space once occupied by the king's earthly vessel. Anne and Catherine exchanged a look, pride melded with profound loss. At last, the chapel doors opened. A cool breeze swept through the courtyard, carrying the scent of lavender from the surrounding gardens Charles treasured. William lifted his head, the first sovereign to emerge from this rite in generations. Flanked by his sister and his wife, he faced the gathered family, drawing in a steadying breath. And so, we prepare to witness the final reflections of this historic day where legacy and renewal converge as the monarchy steps forward into an unwritten tomorrow. Stepping from the chapel into the cool Windsor air, King William V paused for a moment, his first breath of freedom after the private committal. Behind him, Princess Anne and Catherine formed a protective triangle, their faces set with resolve. Together they walked toward a small dais, draped in the royal standard, where the new monarch would address his people for the first time. William approached the microphone beneath a canopy of ancient stone, the castle's turrets standing sentinel overhead. He began in a voice both clear and measured. "My family and I are deeply moved by the outpouring of support we have received," he said, eyes sweeping the assembled dignitaries and family members. "Today we bid farewell to my father Charles III, a man of boundless compassion and unwavering duty. His legacy of service, of stewardship of our planet, and of dedication to all corners of this Commonwealth will guide us forward." As he spoke, Catherine subtly adjusted her stance, ensuring his mantle fell just so across his shoulder. Anne nodded once sharply, her naval salute still fresh in her posture. The crowd fell silent as William paused, steadying himself. In the days ahead, we will honor him not only with ceremonies, but through action, by renewing our commitment to the causes he championed, and by serving our communities with the same spirit he embodied. Behind him, the Royal Marines Band struck up the first notes of God Save the King. The anthem's strains floated over the courtyard, mingling with the crisp afternoon breeze. William bowed his head in deference. Anne kept her gaze forward, and Catherine placed a supportive hand on his elbow, an image of unity that spoke louder than words. With the public address complete, the trio moved to greet the extended family and visiting heads of state. A hush of respect settled over the assembled guests as William exchanged firm handshakes and whispered condolences. One world leader pressed a small leather-bound book into Catherine's hand, a personal journal Charles had gifted him years before. Catherine accepted it with a nod, promising to treasure the memory within. As the formal engagements wound down, a lighter moment emerged. Anne, ever perceptive, leaned toward William and murmured a private joke about their father's penchant for misplacing his watch, a quip that brought the new king a brief, genuine smile. Catherine suppressed a laugh, and for a fleeting second, Windsor Castle seemed less like a fortress of duty and more like a family home, recalling cherished traditions. Meanwhile, on the castle lawns below, townspeople and tourists gathered waving small Union flags. Some had traveled hundreds of miles, others lined up at dawn, determined to witness this historic day. Children perched on parents' shoulders, their eyes wide as the royal party appeared. When William, Anne, and Catherine stepped onto a raised platform to wave, the crowd erupted in respectful applause that echoed through the valley gardens. As the sun began its descent, the family retreated behind castle gates. Inside, plans were already unfolding a national initiative to plant 1 million trees in Charles's honor expansion of community mental health programs, championed by Catherine, and a streamlined royal household structure envisioned by William. Behind closed doors, the siblings would sift through personal mementos, prince's letters, childhood drawings, and the organic gardening gloves Charles had prized. This day marked both an end and a beginning. The United Kingdom emerged from its deepest sorrow, carrying forward the values King Charles instilled. Princess Anne's steadfast leadership and Catherine's compassionate guidance set the tone for a modern monarchy, one that balances tradition with empathy, duty with innovation. And at its center stands King William V, poised to honor the past even as he charts a new course. From the hush of St. George's Chapel to the cheers on the castle lawn, today's events wove a narrative of collective grief transformed into collective purpose. The monarchy has turned a page, and the next chapter promises to be defined by the same integrity and vision that King Charles III exemplified.